The soil above shifted. A minute disturbance, imperceptible to the casual observer, but to the creature below, a thunderous collapse. For 4 centuries the earth had pressed against his chest, filled his nostrils and plugged his ears. 400 years of perfect, unrelenting darkness. 400 years of paralyzed consciousness. Count Mikhail Dracul Ravenwood had not died when they buried him. The wooden stake had missed his heart by inches, and the holy water they'd poured down his throat had only burned like liquid fire before his preternatural body neutralized it. His attackers, peasants led by that damnable priest, had been certain of their victory as they'd thrown his body into the hastily dug grave and piled the dirt atop him, chanting their prayers of eternal containment. He had tried to scream, to move, to transform, but the combination of his injuries and the blessed silver chains they'd wrapped around his limbs had rendered him powerless. Not dead, never dead, just waiting, conscious, hungry, mad. And now something was happening above. Something was disturbing the sanctity of his tomb. Eleanor Blackwood huffed as she climbed the steep wooded hill, her plus-sized frame protesting each step. The late October air bit at her cheeks, but sweat still rolled down her spine beneath her heavy black coat. The forest around the small Carpathian village had been exactly as beautiful as the travel blogs had promised. All fiery autumn colors and misty Gothic atmosphere, but significantly more vertical than she'd anticipated. "This is what happens when you follow folklore instead of official tour guides," she muttered to herself, pausing to catch her breath. Her hand found a tree trunk, fingers digging into the rough bark for support. Normal people go to Paris for their sabbatical, but no, you had to chase vampire legends in Romania. Her dissertation on Eastern European burial customs was due next semester, and after 7 years of teaching undergraduate folklore at a small Midwestern college, this research trip was long overdue. The local villagers had directed her to this hill with knowing smiles and suspicious glances. According to them, it contained the unmarked grave of a Strigoi, buried during the late Renaissance. Eleanor had nodded politely at their warnings not to disturb the site. Such superstitions were precisely what made her research valuable. Document the folklore, photograph the location, analyze the cultural significance. That was her methodical plan. What she hadn't planned for was the storm. Dark clouds now gathered overhead with supernatural speed, and the wind picked up, whipping her long chestnut hair across her face. Thunder rumbled in the distance. "Perfect," she sighed, looking up at the darkening sky. Just perfect. She needed to find this supposed gravesite quickly, take her photographs, and get back to the village before the deluge began. Consulting her crude hand-drawn map once more, she pushed forward through the underbrush, her heavy hiking boots crunching on dead leaves and twigs. The trees suddenly thinned, revealing a small clearing. Unlike the rest of the vibrant autumn forest, this circular patch seemed drained of life. The grass was yellowed and sparse. No wildflowers grew here. At the center lay a depression in the earth, as if the ground had slowly been sinking inward for centuries. "This has to be it," she whispered, a scholarly excitement replacing her physical discomfort. She approached the depression carefully, her trained eye noting how unnatural it appeared. Too perfectly oval, too deliberately positioned in the exact center of the clearing. Eleanor set down her backpack and retrieved her camera. The first fat droplets of rain began to fall as she circled the depression, taking photographs from various angles. The raindrops increased in frequency, and the wind howled through the trees with growing fury. She would need to hurry. Kneeling beside the sunken earth, she noticed something peculiar. A small metallic gleam peeked through the soil, something that didn't belong in a centuries-old grave. Curiosity overrode caution as she brushed away the dirt with her fingers. It was a silver chain link, blackened with age, but unmistakably worked by human hands. Eleanor's heart raced. This could be physical evidence of the burial practices she'd been researching, perhaps part of the funerary rituals used for suspected vampires. Without thinking, she grasped the link and pulled gently, hoping to extract just enough of the chain to photograph without disturbing the site too significantly. The chain resisted at first, then suddenly gave way with surprising force, causing Eleanor to tumble backward. Lightning split the sky directly overhead, and thunder crashed simultaneously, shaking the ground beneath her. The rain now fell in sheets, instantly soaking her to the skin. But Eleanor barely noticed. Her eyes were fixed on the depression, which had begun to shift and crumble inward. "No, no, no," she muttered, scrambling to her knees. Had she triggered some kind of sinkhole? The last thing she needed was to be responsible for destroying a historically significant site, or worse, falling into whatever lay beneath. She should run, return to the village, perhaps bring back help. But academic responsibility and simple human concern for whatever archaeological treasures might be damaged kept her rooted to the spot. As the earth continued to collapse inward, Eleanor crawled forward cautiously to peer into the widening hole. A hand shot up from the darkness. Eleanor screamed, falling backward once more, her camera flying from her grasp. The pale, dirt-encrusted hand clawed at the air, fingers unnaturally long and tipped with what looked disturbingly like talons rather than human nails. Reason told her to flee, but shock had paralyzed her limbs. She watched in horror as another hand emerged, then shoulders, then a head. A man, if it could be called that, pulling himself from the earth like some nightmarish parody of birth. He was filthy, caked with centuries of soil. Yet beneath the grime, his face possessed an unearthly beauty, sharp, aristocratic features, a strong jaw and deep-set eyes that suddenly snapped open to reveal irises of such intense crimson that they seemed to glow in the storm's darkness. The creature, the man, the vampire, heaved himself fully from the grave and collapsed onto the grass. His body was wrapped in the remnants of once fine clothing, now merely tattered rags, clinging to a frame that was simultaneously skeletal and sinewy. The silver chains that had apparently bound him now hung broken from his wrists and ankles. Eleanor's mind raced through every vampire legend she had ever studied. Stake through the heart, decapitation, fire. She had none of these at her disposal, and even if she did, her body refused to move. She could only stare, academic fascination warring with primal terror. The creature's chest did not rise or fall with breath. He lay motionless for long moments, those terrible red eyes fixed on the storming sky above. Then, slowly, he turned his head toward her. "You," he rasped, his voice like stone grinding against stone, speaking in an archaic Romanian dialect that Eleanor, thanks to years of linguistic study, could partially understand. "You who has freed me." Eleanor swallowed hard, her throat dry despite the rain pouring down her face. I didn't mean to," she managed in modern Romanian, hoping he would comprehend. A horrible sound emerged from him. It took her a moment to recognize it as laughter. "Intention matters not," he said, struggling to sit upright. "The deed is done. After 4 centuries of darkness, I am released." Eleanor's scholarly mind somehow continued to function through her fear. 4 centuries. That would place his imprisonment in the late 16th century, consistent with the most intense periods of vampire hysteria in this region. Was it possible? Could legends be real? "What? Who are you?" she asked, her academic curiosity momentarily overriding her terror. The creature's head tilted, studying her with those burning eyes. "I am Count Mikhail Dracul Ravenwood, rightful lord of these lands." His gaze intensified. "And you, woman of strange accent and strange attire, what are you called?" "Dr. Eleanor Blackwood," she replied automatically, immediately regretting offering her name to this being. "Doctor," he repeated, the word seeming to confuse him. "A woman physician. The world has indeed changed." He attempted to stand but faltered, his weakened limbs betraying him. 400 years without blood has left me diminished, The implied threat was clear. Eleanor finally commanded her legs to move, scrambling backward through the mud. "Stay away from me." "I cannot," he said simply. "You have broken my chains. By the ancient laws, I am bound to you now by a debt of blood, and I must feed." He lunged forward with shocking speed despite his weakened state. Eleanor screamed as his cold hands grasped her shoulders, pushing her onto her back in the wet grass. His face loomed above hers, dirt washing away in rivulets in the rain, revealing marble-white skin beneath. His lips pulled back to reveal fangs, yellowed with age, but sharply pointed. Eleanor's survival instinct finally kicked in. She thrashed beneath him, her larger frame giving her some advantage against his emaciated state. "Get off me!" she shouted, bringing her knee up hard between his legs. The vampire hissed in pain, but didn't release her. "Spirited!" he growled. "Good! The blood of the fearless is always sweeter." His head descended toward her neck. Eleanor turned her face away, squeezing her eyes shut, certain these were her final moments. In desperation, she did the only thing she could think of. She turned back suddenly and pressed her lips against his in a kiss meant to startle, to confuse, to buy even a second's reprieve. The effect was instantaneous and unexpected. The vampire went rigid above her, his eyes widening in shock. A current of energy seemed to pass between them, almost electrical in its intensity. Eleanor felt it too, a strange warmth spreading from her lips throughout her body, despite the cold rain and the colder touch of the undead creature. He jerked away as if burned, staring down at her with an expression of confusion and something that looked almost like wonder. "Impossible," he whispered. "The prophecy." Eleanor had no idea what prophecy he meant, but she seized the opportunity of his distraction to shove him aside with all her strength. To her surprise, he offered no resistance, rolling onto the ground beside her. She scrambled to her feet, ready to run, but curiosity once again betrayed her. "What prophecy?" she demanded, backing away slowly. The vampire remained on the ground, looking up at the raging sky, then back at her with those blood-red eyes. "When I was imprisoned, a witch cast a final curse upon me, that I would lie conscious but paralyzed for eternity, unless awakened by—" He paused, seeming almost embarrassed. "By the kiss of a woman of substance, a woman whose flesh carries the abundance of life." Eleanor's academic mind translated the archaic phrasing instantly, and her face flushed with indignation. "Are you saying a fat woman's kiss was the only thing that could wake you up?" The vampire blinked, clearly not understanding her offense. "The witch's words, not mine. She believed no such woman would ever find my grave, much less offer me such intimacy." Despite the absurdity of the situation, despite the fact that she was standing in a downpour arguing with an actual vampire, Eleanor felt the familiar sting of body shaming. Even in centuries-old curses, fat phobia was apparently alive and well. "Well, this woman of substance isn't offering anything else," she said firmly. "I'm leaving now, and I suggest you do whatever it is undead Romanian noblemen do when they're not terrorizing folklore professors." She turned to go, but his voice stopped her. "I cannot let you leave." There was something different in his tone now, not threatening but desperate. "The curse is not fully broken. The awakening is but the first part." Eleanor glanced back. The vampire had managed to rise to one knee, his head bowed as if in supplication. "The witch's curse binds us together now," he continued. "If you go beyond my reach, the pain will begin again, for both of us, and it will not end until the second part of the prophecy is fulfilled." A chill that had nothing to do with the rain ran down Eleanor's spine. "What second part?" Lightning illuminated his face, highlighting the strange vulnerability there. "That I must make amends for the darkness of my past deeds. That I must learn to love, and be loved in return, by the woman who awakened me." His eyes met hers. "Or else, when the next blood moon rises 30 days hence, we both shall perish in fire." Eleanor stared at him, rainwater streaming down her face, mind reeling between scholarly skepticism and the undeniable evidence of the supernatural literally kneeling before her. You expect me to believe that I'm now magically bound to a centuries-old vampire because of some curse, and that we have to, what, fall in love, or we'll spontaneously combust in a month? She shook her head. That's ridiculous. The vampire's expression hardened. You stand before a creature of legend, one who has endured 4 centuries of conscious burial, and yet you find a witch's curse ridiculous? He struggled to his feet, swaying slightly. Whether you believe or not, the bond is formed. Even now, can you not feel it? Eleanor was about to deny it when she noticed a strange sensation, a tugging behind her sternum, a warmth that didn't belong to her, emotions that seemed foreign yet increasingly familiar. Fascination, hunger, fear, confusion. Were these her feelings, or his? "This can't be happening," she whispered. "And yet it is," Count Ravenwood replied. He straightened to his full height, the rain having washed away enough of the centuries of dirt to reveal a man who might once have been imposing. "Dr. Eleanor Blackwood, you have awakened me from my living death. Now we are bound by forces beyond our understanding, with but one moon's cycle to break a curse centuries in the making." Lightning flashed again, and in that instant, Eleanor saw something move in the forest behind him. Dark shapes, multiple figures approaching through the trees. The vampire sensed her alarm and turned, his posture immediately tensing. "We are not alone," he hissed, moving with unexpected swiftness to stand beside her. "And after 4 centuries, it seems my enemies still hunt." As the shadowy figures emerged from the tree line, Eleanor glimpsed the glint of modern weapons and ancient symbols carved into their flesh. Whatever was happening, whatever impossible situation she'd stumbled into, it was about to become much more dangerous. Part 2. "Get behind me," Mikhail commanded, his voice resonating with centuries of authority despite his weakened state. Eleanor hesitated, caught between the known danger of the vampire and the unknown threat approaching through the rain. "Who are they?" "The Brotherhood of the Silver Flame," Mikhail growled, his eyes fixed on the advancing figures. "Descendants of those who buried me, hunters who passed their hatred down through generations." The figures, 5 men in modern tactical gear adorned with ancient symbols, spread out in a semicircle around them. Their leader stepped forward, a tall man with a weathered face and cold blue eyes. A silver medallion gleamed at his throat. "Step away from the creature, ma'am," he called in English, his Eastern European accent thick but understandable. "You don't know what you've unleashed." "I think I have a pretty good idea, actually," Eleanor replied, surprised by her own steadiness. "And I'm not stepping anywhere until you explain who you are and why you're carrying weapons in a Romanian forest." The man's expression hardened. "I am Victor Dalka, commander of the Brotherhood. We have safeguarded this region from the Strigoi for 15 generations. His gaze shifted to Mikhail. "This one especially, the bloody Count of Ravenwood, responsible for hundreds of deaths before our ancestors managed to chain him." Eleanor felt a chill that had nothing to do with her soaked clothing. She glanced at Mikhail, whose face remained impassive, though through their strange new connection, she sensed tumult, rage, shame, and something deeper she couldn't identify. "That was a different time," Mikhail said, "a different man." Victor's laugh was harsh. "The undead do not change, monster. They only hunger." He reached into his tactical vest and withdrew a wooden stake, its tip gleaming with silver. "This ends tonight." The men began to advance, weapons raised. Eleanor's mind raced. She was a folklore professor caught between vampire hunters and an actual vampire. This wasn't in any research methodology she'd studied. "Wait!" she shouted, holding up her hands. "If you kill him, you might kill me too!" That stopped Victor mid-step. "Explain." "There's a curse," Eleanor said, the absurdity of her words not lost on her. When he awakened, it bound us together. Something about a blood moon and 30 days. The hunters exchanged glances. Victor's eyes narrowed. "The prophecy of Seraphina," he muttered. "So it's true." "You know about this?" Eleanor asked incredulously. "Our archives speak of it. The final curse of the witch Seraphina upon Count Ravenwood, a safeguard should he ever escape his imprisonment." Victor studied Eleanor with new interest. "You are the woman of substance, the one foretold." Eleanor bit back a retort about their choice of words. "If you know about the curse, then you know killing him might kill me. I'm an American citizen, a professor. I have rights." "Rights mean nothing in matters of the undead," Victor said coldly. "But the curse, that gives us options." He turned to his men and gave orders in rapid Romanian, too dialectical for Eleanor to follow completely. The men lowered their weapons but remained vigilant. Victor approached, stopping a cautious distance away. "The curse gives us 30 days until the blood moon," he said. "Time we can use. If the Strigoi must truly earn redemption to break the curse, then we will test him. And if he fails, if his true nature emerges, we will destroy him, whatever the cost." "And me?" Eleanor asked, her voice smaller than she intended. Victor's gaze was not unkind, but unflinching. "Let us hope it doesn't come to that, Professor." The rain began to ease, though thunder still rolled in the distance. Eleanor became acutely aware of Mikhail standing beside her, his presence like a cold fire against her consciousness. "I need to feed," Mikhail said quietly, for her ears alone. 4 centuries without blood. I cannot regain my strength otherwise." "That's not happening," she whispered back. "Not from you," he clarified. "But soon, or I will be of little use against them." Victor stepped back and gestured to his men. "The sun will rise in 3 hours. You will both come with us to the village. We have a secure location where the creature can be contained during daylight hours." "And if we refuse?" Mikhail asked, straightening to his full height. Victor's smile was thin. "Then we learn immediately whether the curse truly binds your lives together." Eleanor felt Mikhail's rage pulse through their connection, but also his calculation. He was too weak to fight, and they both knew it. "Fine," Eleanor said before Mikhail could speak. "We'll come with you, but I want to make something clear. I'm not your prisoner. I'm a visiting academic, and I expect to be treated with respect." Victor gave a slight bow. "Of course, Professor. Your cooperation is appreciated. As for the Strigoi," he turned cold eyes to Mikhail. 4 centuries was not enough, it seems. Consider this your probation." The secure location turned out to be a modernized cellar beneath the village's oldest building, a stone structure that had once been a church, but now served as the Brotherhood's headquarters. The main floor looked like any historical society museum, but the subterranean level told a different story. Eleanor gaped at the arsenal of vampire-hunting weapons displayed on the walls, everything from traditional wooden stakes to what appeared to be specialized firearms. Glass cases contained ancient manuscripts and relics. A high-tech surveillance system monitored the facility. "Your tax dollars at work?" she asked Victor sarcastically. "Private funding," he replied. "The Brotherhood has powerful allies who understand the threats we face." They led Mikhail to a reinforced cell, with walls of thick steel and what Eleanor recognized as religious symbols embedded in the framework. Despite his weakened state, they secured him with silver manacles. "Is this really necessary?" Eleanor asked. "He can barely stand." "Do not be deceived, Professor," Victor warned. "Even in his diminished state, he is far stronger than any mortal. And when the sun sets again—" He left the thought unfinished. "I need to speak with him, alone," she insisted. Victor hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes. Then we must discuss your situation." He and his men withdrew, though Eleanor had no doubt they would be watching through the cameras mounted in the corners. When they were as alone as possible, she approached the cell. Mikhail sat on a narrow cot, his head bowed. Without the rain and in proper lighting, she could see him more clearly. Despite the grime and tattered clothing, there was no denying his otherworldly beauty: high cheekbones, strong jawline, and those disturbing crimson eyes that now lifted to meet hers. "I imagined my liberation differently," he said, raising his shackled wrists. "I imagined my research trip differently," she countered. "Not cursed and bonded to a vampire." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Fair enough." Eleanor wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware she was still soaking wet and chilled to the bone. "Is it true? What they said about you? Hundreds of deaths." His expression darkened. "I was not always monstrous. But yes, there was a time when I earned my reputation, when grief and rage consumed me." "What happened?" Mikhail looked away. "That is a story for another time, when we are truly alone." His eyes returned to hers, intense and probing. "You are a scholar of my kind. I study folklore, burial customs. I never believed," she gestured at him, "this. And yet here we are." He leaned forward. "The curse is real, Eleanor. I can feel it binding us, like a chain pulled taut between our souls. And it will kill us both when the blood moon rises if we cannot fulfill its conditions." Eleanor rubbed her temples. "This is insane. Love can't be forced, especially not with a monster," he finished for her. "I was going to say a complete stranger," she corrected, though the thought had crossed her mind. "We have 30 days to become less strange to one another." His gaze softened marginally. "I have no more desire for this bond than you do. But I have no wish to return to oblivion, nor to drag you with me." Before Eleanor could respond, the door opened and Victor returned. "Time's up, Professor. We need to talk." He led her to what appeared to be a conference room, where a young woman waited with a stack of towels and dry clothing. "Change first," Victor instructed, "then we'll discuss terms." 15 minutes later, dressed in borrowed clothes that were slightly too small but blissfully dry, Eleanor sat across from Victor at the conference table. A steaming mug of tea sat before her, and she wrapped her hands around it gratefully. "The situation is unprecedented," Victor began. "No one has awakened Ravenwood in 4 centuries, despite several attempts by those who sought his power." "Attempts? People tried to dig him up?" Victor nodded. "Occultists, power seekers. They never succeeded. The witch's magic protected his grave until the right person came along." He studied her. "You?" Eleanor shifted uncomfortably. "I don't understand why. I'm just an academic." The witch Seraphina was clever. She chose criteria that would seem impossible in her time. A learned woman, independent, physically unlike the ideals of that era. She believed such a woman would never exist, or if she did, would never find Ravenwood's grave. "Great," Eleanor muttered. "So I'm a statistical anomaly. You're the key to either Ravenwood's redemption or his final destruction," Victor corrected, "and we intend to ensure it's the latter." Eleanor set down her mug. "Hold on. The curse says we both die if he doesn't find redemption. How exactly are you planning to ensure his destruction without killing me too?" Victor's expression was carefully neutral. "We have our own experts researching ways to break your connection to him. If we can sever the bond before the blood moon rises." "You can kill him without killing me," she finished. "How thoughtful. It's the most humane solution. Ravenwood cannot be allowed to walk free again. You've read the folklore. You know what vampires do." Eleanor leaned forward. "What I know is that folklore is complex and often contradictory. Not all vampire legends paint them as mindless killers. This is not academic theory, Professor. This is reality. I've seen what his kind can do, and I've just had my entire worldview shattered," Eleanor countered. "So forgive me if I don't immediately jump on the stake him and ask questions later bandwagon." Victor studied her for a long moment. "You feel his emotions, don't you? Through the bond." She hesitated, then nodded. "Then be careful. The connection works both ways. He will use it to manipulate you, to make you sympathize with him." Victor stood. "We've prepared quarters for you upstairs. You'll be comfortable, but you cannot leave the building, for your own safety." "So I am a prisoner." "A protected witness," he corrected smoothly. Dawn approaches. The Strigoi will soon be paralyzed by daylight. We should both rest. Tomorrow night will bring its own challenges. Eleanor slept fitfully in the small but comfortable room they'd given her. Her dreams were chaotic. Flashes of forests and castles, the sensation of flying, and an overwhelming thirst that burned her throat. She woke mid-morning, disoriented and uneasy, after a shower and breakfast brought to her room by a silent, watchful Brotherhood member. She demanded access to her backpack, which they'd retrieved from the forest. To her relief, her laptop and research materials were intact, if slightly damp. She spent hours researching the curse that bound her to Mikhail, cross-referencing everything she could find about the witch Seraphina and blood moon prophecies. The Brotherhood had provided internet access, but blocked certain sites, another reminder that despite the polite treatment, she wasn't free. Around mid-afternoon, there was a knock at her door. A young woman entered, different from the one who'd brought her clothes the previous night. She was perhaps in her late 20s, with olive skin and sharp, intelligent eyes. "Professor Blackwood, I'm Irina Dalka, Victor's sister." She offered her hand. "And the Brotherhood's resident historian." Eleanor shook it cautiously. "Historian, not hunter?" Irina smiled. "We serve different functions. My brother handles the more physical aspects of our work. I handle the knowledge." She gestured to Eleanor's laptop. "I understand you're researching the curse. Perhaps I can help." Eleanor hesitated, then nodded. "I could use some first-hand information. Everything online is contradictory." Irina sat across from her. "The curse is documented in our archives. Seraphina was not just any witch. She was Ravenwood's lover before his transformation." "His lover?" Eleanor hadn't found that detail anywhere. "Yes. According to our records, they were to be married. But Ravenwood was ambitious, hungry for power. He made a pact with darker forces, willingly becoming Strigoi." Irina's eyes darkened. "Seraphina tried to stop him, and in his newfound bloodlust he attacked her, nearly killing her. But she survived. Barely, and dedicated the rest of her life to stopping him. The imprisonment spell was her masterwork, but she knew it might not hold forever. So she created the contingency, the curse of redemption." Eleanor considered this. Why make redemption possible at all? Why not just destroy him? "Because she loved him still," Irina said simply. "Even after everything, she believed the man she loved was still within the monster somewhere." The thought was unsettling. Eleanor changed the subject. "Victor mentioned you've been researching ways to break the bond between me and Mikhail." Irina nodded. "There may be possibilities. Blood magic can sometimes be undone with the right rituals, but it's dangerous work, and the consequences of failure," she trailed off, "could be worse than just letting the curse play out," Eleanor finished. "Exactly." Irina leaned forward. "I understand your reluctance to condemn him immediately. As a fellow scholar, I respect that. But please understand, Ravenwood's victims weren't just random prey. He targeted families, children." Eleanor felt sick. "Why?" "Revenge. After his transformation, he returned to his estate to find his younger brother had claimed his titles and lands. In his rage, he slaughtered not just his brother, but his brother's wife and children. And that was just the beginning." Before Eleanor could respond, shouting erupted somewhere in the building. Irina stood quickly, her expression alarmed. "What is it?" Eleanor asked. "The sun is still up," Irina said, moving to the door. "Ravenwood should be dormant. Unless—" More shouts, and then running footsteps in the corridor. Irina opened the door to see Brotherhood members rushing toward the stairwell that led to the cellar. "Stay here," she ordered Eleanor, then hurried after them. Eleanor waited approximately 30 seconds before following. Whatever was happening involved Mikhail, which meant it involved her too. She made her way down the corridor, following the sounds of commotion to the stairwell. The scene in the cellar made her stop short. Victor and 3 other men stood outside Mikhail's cell, weapons drawn. Inside, Mikhail was awake, impossibly, terribly awake during daylight hours, and writhing on the floor in apparent agony. His skin smoked where patches of sunlight from a tiny high window touched it, but he wasn't immobilized, as vampire lore suggested he should be. "This isn't possible," Victor was saying. "No Strigoi can move during daylight hours, let alone one as weakened as he is." Mikhail's eyes, wild with pain, found Eleanor at the entrance. "The bond," he gasped. "It's changing me, changing us both." Victor spun to see Eleanor. "I told you to stay upstairs." "I felt his pain," she admitted, realizing it was true. The burning sensation she'd attributed to her dream thirst had been Mikhail's suffering bleeding through their connection. Irina stepped forward. "The curse must be accelerating because of the approaching blood moon. It's forcing changes already." Mikhail managed to crawl away from the patch of sunlight, collapsing against the far wall. His breathing was ragged, another impossibility for a being who shouldn't need to breathe at all. "I'm hungry," he rasped. "Not just for blood. I feel human hungers." Irina's eyes widened. "The redemption," she whispered. "It's literal. The curse is making him mortal again." "Impossible," Victor snapped. "No Strigoi has ever returned to humanity." "Perhaps that's why the curse was designed to kill them both if redemption fails," Irina suggested. "Because it's attempting the impossible." Eleanor moved closer to the cell, ignoring Victor's warning hand. "Mikhail, what else are you feeling?" His crimson eyes met hers, and she felt a jolt of connection between them. Stronger now, more defined. "Everything," he whispered. "I feel everything. Hunger, pain, cold." His expression became haunted. "Remorse." The last word hung in the air like a physical thing. Victor and his men exchanged uneasy glances. "It could be a trick," Victor said, but uncertainty tinged his voice. "We should run tests," Irina suggested. "Blood analysis, tissue samples." "He's not a lab rat," Eleanor interrupted, surprising herself with her vehemence. "He's in pain. We need to help him." "Help him?" Victor echoed incredulously. "He's killed hundreds, maybe thousands. And if the curse is real, then he has a chance at redemption," Eleanor countered. "Don't you want to know if it's possible? Isn't that knowledge worth something to the Brotherhood?" Victor considered this, then slowly nodded. "We'll provide basic sustenance, but he remains confined. And you," he turned to Eleanor, "you will keep your distance. The bond is clearly strengthening, which makes you vulnerable to his influence." Eleanor wanted to argue, but felt a wave of exhaustion sweep over her, not her own, but Mikhail's, bleeding through their connection. He had collapsed on his cot, the brief surge of energy from her presence already fading. "Fine," she agreed reluctantly, "but I want full access to your archives, everything you have on Serafina, on Mikhail, on the curse. If I'm going to survive this, I need to understand it." Victor nodded. "Irina will help you, but remember, Professor, understanding the monster doesn't make him less dangerous. Sometimes it only makes his bite more certain." As they left Mikhail to his fitful rest, Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that they were all missing something vital about the curse. Redemption through love seemed impossibly storybook, too neat for the messy reality of what was happening. And as she followed Irina toward the archives, she felt a new sensation through the bond, a memory not her own, of a woman with flame-red hair and fierce eyes, whispering words of both love and condemnation as she drove a stake into the heart of the man she had once planned to marry, Serafina. Eleanor shivered. The witch's presence seemed to linger even 4 centuries later, her curse weaving itself through time to entangle them all. And Eleanor couldn't escape the suspicion that Serafina's true intentions and the real nature of the curse were far more complex than any of them yet understood. The ancient pages of the Brotherhood archives crumbled slightly beneath Eleanor's fingertips, despite her careful handling. 3 days had passed since she'd freed Mikhail from his grave, and she'd spent most of them buried in these musty tomes, searching for any clue about Serafina's true intentions. "Find anything useful?" Irina asked, setting down a mug of coffee beside Eleanor's elbow. Maybe. Eleanor pointed to a passage written in archaic Romanian. This section describes Serafina performing the curse ritual, but there's something odd about the phrasing. Irina leaned closer, her brow furrowing as she translated, and she mingled her blood with his, binding their fates beyond death, beyond time. She looked up. That's not unusual for blood magic. No, but this is. Eleanor flipped to another marked page. According to this account, Serafina didn't just curse Mikhail, she died performing the spell. She sacrificed herself. Irina's eyes widened. That's not in our official records. Which makes me wonder what else isn't. Eleanor rubbed her tired eyes. People don't typically sacrifice their lives for simple revenge. There had to be more to it. A commotion from the hallway interrupted their discussion. Victor burst through the door, his expression grim. "We have a problem," he announced. "Ravenwood is asking for blood." Eleanor stood immediately. "Human blood?" He says animal blood won't sustain the changes happening to his body. Victor's jaw tightened. He's growing weaker. Through their bond, Eleanor had felt Mikhail's increasing discomfort. Hunger pangs that gnawed at her own stomach, a bone-deep fatigue that wasn't hers. The transformation was taking a toll on both of them. "I need to see him," she insisted. Victor looked like he wanted to refuse, but after a moment's hesitation, he nodded. 5 minutes. No physical contact. The changes in Mikhail were shocking. His skin, once marble white, now had an almost greyish cast. The supernatural sheen had dimmed in his crimson eyes, which now appeared more burgundy than blood red. He sat hunched on his cot, silver chains still binding his wrists, though they seemed unnecessarily cruel given his condition. "You look terrible," Eleanor said, approaching the bars. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Your honesty is refreshing after centuries of fearful reverence. Victor says you need human blood." Mikhail nodded weakly. "The curse is remaking me, drawing me back toward humanity, but the transition requires sustenance. You understand why they're hesitant?" "Of course." His eyes met hers. "But I am not asking to hunt. A donation would suffice." His gaze flickered to her wrist briefly before returning to her face. Eleanor felt a chill. "You want my blood?" "The bond would make it the most effective, yes. But anyone's would help." Eleanor studied him, trying to separate her own emotions from the foreign feelings seeping through their connection. Was his desperation genuine, or was he manipulating her? "I've been researching Serafina," she said, changing the subject. "Did you know she died casting the curse?" Mikhail's expression darkened. "I didn't. I was not myself when they buried me." "What happened between you? The real story, not the Brotherhood's version." He was silent for a long moment. "We loved each other once, truly, but I was born to nobility in an era when power was everything." His eyes grew distant. "When the opportunity came to transcend human limitations, I took it without hesitation. I thought she would join me in immortality. But she refused. She did more than refuse. She tried to stop the ritual." Pain flashed across his features. "In my arrogance, I struck her down. By the time I realized what I'd done, the transformation had begun. The man who loved her died that night, and the monster who emerged." He looked away. "Well, you know what the monster did. You killed your brother and his family. The first of many atrocities." His voice was hollow. "I cannot undo those deeds, but this curse, it forces me to feel their weight. Human remorse is excruciating." Eleanor felt the truth of his words through their bond, a crushing guilt that threatened to suffocate her. Whatever else Mikhail was, his regret was genuine. "I'll talk to Victor about the blood," she said finally, "but I can't promise anything." Mikhail nodded, then suddenly tensed, his head turning toward the ceiling, as if hearing something beyond human perception. "What is it?" Eleanor asked. "They've found us," he whispered. "They're coming." Before Eleanor could question him further, alarms blared throughout the facility. Victor burst into the room, face tense. "We're under attack," he announced. "The Crimson Order has found us." "The what?" Eleanor demanded. "Vampire worshippers," Mikhail explained, struggling to his feet. "Humans who serve the undead in exchange for promises of immortality. They've been searching for Ravenwood for centuries," Victor added grimly. "Someone in the village must have talked." He turned to Mikhail. "Are they here for you?" "Undoubtedly," Mikhail confirmed. "The Order believes I possess knowledge of the original vampire ritual. They've hunted me since before my imprisonment." The building shuddered as something heavy impacted the upper floors. Dust filtered down from the ceiling. "We need to evacuate," Victor decided. He hesitated, then produced a key and approached Mikhail's cell. "If they capture you, will you join them?" Mikhail met his gaze steadily. "Once, perhaps, but now, no. What the curse has awakened in me, I cannot silence again." Victor unlocked the cell, but left the silver manacles on Mikhail's wrists. "One wrong move, and I'll end you, curse or no curse." They hurried upstairs to find the Brotherhood's headquarters in chaos. Black-robed figures had breached the main floor, engaging in combat with Victor's men. These weren't the tactical gear-wearing hunters Eleanor had expected, but rather a mix of ordinary-looking people, wielding both modern weapons and ancient-looking ceremonial daggers. "This way," Irina appeared beside them, leading them toward a back hallway. "There's a tunnel system beneath the village. We can escape through—" A deafening explosion cut her off as part of the ceiling collapsed. Eleanor found herself thrown to the floor, ears ringing. Through smoke and dust, she saw Irina pinned beneath a fallen beam, blood trickling from her forehead. "Irina!" Victor rushed to his sister, trying desperately to lift the massive wooden beam. "Go!" Irina coughed. "Get Ravenwood and the professor out of here. That's what matters now." "I won't leave you," Victor insisted. Eleanor felt a strange surge of strength through her bond with Mikhail. She turned to see him closing his eyes in concentration, his emaciated form trembling with effort. Then, with a sound like metal under strain, the silver manacles on his wrists cracked and fell away. Before Victor could react, Mikhail moved to the fallen beam with inhuman speed. Diminished, but still beyond human capability. He gripped the massive timber, and with visible effort, lifted it enough for Victor to pull Irina free. "Why?" Victor demanded as he cradled his injured sister. "Consider it the first step toward redemption," Mikhail answered, sagging against the wall, clearly drained by the exertion. Black-robed figures appeared at both ends of the hallway, trapping them. "There he is!" one of them shouted. "The Ancient One! Kneel before Count Ravenwood," another intoned, raising a ceremonial blade. Eleanor tensed, expecting Mikhail to embrace his worshippers. Instead, he straightened to his full height, his voice taking on a commanding quality that raised goosebumps on her arms. "You dishonor yourselves with false worship," he declared. "I am not your salvation." Confusion rippled through the cultists. Their leader stepped forward, a tall woman with intricate scarlet tattoos visible on her neck above her robes. "Great One, we have searched for you through the centuries," she said reverently. "The time of ascension is at hand. The blood moon approaches." "The blood moon is not for you," Mikhail replied coldly. "Leave this place." The woman's reverent expression hardened. "We will not be denied. If you will not lead us willingly, we will take what we need from your blood." She gestured to her followers. "Take him! Kill the others!" The cultists surged forward. Victor pushed Irina behind him and drew his weapon, but they were outnumbered. Eleanor felt a moment of pure terror as a robed figure lunged toward her with a raised dagger. Then Mikhail was there, intercepting her attacker with a swift motion that sent the cultist crashing into a wall. He moved through the attackers with brutal efficiency, his weakened state still more than a match for ordinary humans. "Run!" he shouted to Victor. "Get them out! I will hold them off!" Victor hesitated only briefly before gathering Irina in his arms. "This way," he ordered Eleanor, kicking open a concealed door in the paneling. "But Mikhail," Eleanor protested. He can't hold them for long in his condition, Victor said grimly. We need to move. Eleanor cast one last look at Mikhail, who met her eyes across the chaos. A wave of emotion flooded their bond, determination, fear, and something deeper, a desperate need for her to survive. With a pang of guilt, she followed Victor through the hidden door. The tunnel was narrow and damp, clearly ancient. Victor led the way with a flashlight carrying Irina, who drifted in and out of consciousness. Eleanor followed, her mind racing. The bond with Mikhail still thrummed inside her chest, which meant he was alive, but she could feel his strength fading with each passing moment. We need to go back for him, she insisted, as they emerged from the tunnel into a wooded area behind the village. It's too late, Victor replied, laying Irina gently on the ground and checking her wounds. If the Crimson Order doesn't kill him, they'll have taken him by now. For what purpose? Victor's expression darkened. The original transformation ritual requires the blood of an ancient vampire, willingly given. They've been hunting one for generations. He looked up at the darkening sky. With the blood moon coming, the timing is perfect for their ascension ceremony. Eleanor felt sick. So they'll force him to create more vampires? Or die trying, Victor confirmed. But they don't understand what's happening to him. The curse is making him mortal. His blood may not even work for the ritual anymore, which means they'll just keep hurting him until they figure that out. Eleanor's determination hardened. We need to rescue him. Victor stared at her incredulously. Rescue the monster who slaughtered hundreds, who would have drained you dry if you hadn't been bound by a curse. Why? Because no one deserves to be tortured, not even him, because he saved your sister's life, and because... She stopped, surprising herself with the intensity of her feelings. Because if he dies before the curse is resolved, I might die too. I'm not ready to test that theory. Victor studied her for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. I have a safe house nearby. We'll take Irina there, gather supplies, and contact the remaining Brotherhood members. He stood. But understand this. Our priority is stopping the Crimson Order, not saving Ravenwood. Understood. Eleanor didn't argue, but privately she knew her own priorities might differ. The Crimson Order's headquarters turned out to be an abandoned monastery deep in the Carpathian Mountains. By the time Eleanor and Victor arrived with a small team of Brotherhood hunters, night had fallen, and the ancient stone building glowed with candlelight visible through its stained glass windows. They've already begun preparations for the ritual, Victor observed as they concealed themselves in the surrounding forest. The blood moon rises tomorrow night. They'll want him ready. Eleanor reached for her bond with Mikhail, finding it weak but present. He was alive but in pain, so much pain that she had to grit her teeth against the phantom sensation of it. What's the plan? She whispered. We go in through the catacombs, Victor replied. The monastery was built over extensive tunnel systems. The Brotherhood has mapped most of them. He handed out weapons to his team. Our priority is disrupting the ritual preparations and eliminating the Order's leadership. Eleanor accepted the small crossbow he offered her, hoping she wouldn't need to use it. And Mikhail, if we find him and he's still salvageable, we'll extract him. If he's turned back to his old ways... Victor's expression hardened. We do what we must. They moved silently through the forest to a hidden entrance, a narrow opening in a rocky hillside that led to a tight, winding passage. Eleanor struggled to keep up, her plus-size frame not ideal for squeezing through the cramped tunnel, but determination drove her forward. The passage eventually opened into the monastery's catacombs, rows of ancient tombs and bone-lined walls that sent a chill down Eleanor's spine. The sound of chanting filtered down from above. They're in the main chapel, Victor whispered. We'll split up. Team 1 secures the exits, Team 2 with me to disrupt the ritual. He turned to Eleanor. You stay here where it's safe. No way, she protested. I can feel Mikhail through the bond. I can find him faster than you can. Victor clearly wanted to argue, but recognized the logic. Fine, Johannes goes with you. First sign of trouble, you get out. Clear? Eleanor nodded, and Johannes, a grim-faced hunter with a scar running down one cheek, moved to her side. As Victor and the others melted into the shadows, she closed her eyes and focused on the bond. Mikhail's presence pulled her forward, through the catacombs and up a narrow spiral staircase. Johannes followed silently, crossbow at the ready. The pain through the bond intensified as they approached a heavy wooden door. "He's in there," Eleanor whispered. Johannes tested the door and found it locked. With a nod to Eleanor, he produced a small set of lockpicks and made quick work of the ancient mechanism. The door swung open to reveal a small, cell-like room lit by a single torch. Mikhail hung suspended from the ceiling by silver chains that burned his wrists, his feet barely touching the floor. His shirt had been removed, revealing a torso covered in ritual markings, painted in what appeared to be blood. His head hung forward, dark hair obscuring his face. "Mikhail!" Eleanor gasped, rushing forward despite Johannes's warning hand. Mikhail's head lifted slowly, his eyes struggling to focus. When he recognized her, a mix of hope and horror crossed his face. "Eleanor!" he rasped. "You shouldn't be here. It's a trap." Too late. Eleanor sensed movement behind her. She turned to see Johannes collapse, a dart protruding from his neck. In the doorway stood the tattooed woman who had led the attack on the Brotherhood headquarters, flanked by robed figures. "The woman of substance," she said, her voice almost reverent. "Seraphina's chosen vessel. How convenient that you've delivered yourself to us." She stepped into the room, her followers blocking the exit. "The prophecy said the Ancient One must find love before the blood moon. We had planned to force his cooperation. But with you here," her smile was chilling, "the ritual will be complete." "What are you talking about?" Eleanor demanded, positioning herself between the woman and Mikhail. "Seraphina was clever, but she wasn't the only witch of her time." The woman's fingers traced the scarlet tattoos on her neck. "My ancestor was her rival, and she left her own prophecy, that Ravenwood's curse could be turned, his power harnessed at the moment of his redemption." Understanding dawned on Eleanor. "You don't want to save him. You want to use the curse's energy when it breaks. The release of such magic could transform dozens, not just one," the woman confirmed. "An army of the undead, born in a single night." She gestured to her followers. "Secure her. The blood moon rises tomorrow, and we have preparations to complete." Rough hands seized Eleanor's arms. She struggled, but they were too strong. As they dragged her away, her eyes met Mikhail's. Through their bond flowed not just pain and desperation, but something else, a fierce protectiveness that surprised her. "I will find you," his voice whispered directly into her mind, the bond between them suddenly stronger than ever. "Whatever happens, Eleanor, I will find you." Then she was pulled from the room, the door slamming shut between them. As the cultists led her deeper into the monastery, Eleanor felt the truth settling into her bones. The curse, Seraphina's sacrifice, Mikhail's redemption, all of it was building toward something far more dangerous than any of them had imagined. And only the blood moon would reveal whether love could truly conquer centuries of darkness, or whether it would simply birth a greater evil. The monastery's ritual chamber was a cathedral of nightmares. Towering stone arches disappeared into shadow, illuminated only by hundreds of blood-red candles, whose flames cast writhing silhouettes across ancient walls. Eleanor stood at the center of a massive occult symbol etched into the stone floor, a pentagram enclosed within concentric circles filled with arcane script. Her wrists were bound with ceremonial cords dyed crimson, and the cult members had dressed her in a flowing white robe, embroidered with symbols matching those tattooed on their leader's skin. Around her neck hung a heavy silver pendant, shaped like a crescent moon cradling a drop of blood. "You're making a mistake," Eleanor said, as the tattooed woman, who had introduced herself as Lilith, High Priestess of the Crimson Order, arranged ritual implements on an altar carved from a single massive block of obsidian. "The curse isn't meant to create vampires. It's meant to undo what Mikhail became." Lilith smiled, her scarlet tattoos seeming to pulse in the candlelight. Such a limited understanding for a scholar. She lifted an ancient dagger, its blade wavy and irregular like a flame frozen in metal. Seraphina's magic was powerful, yes, but fundamentally flawed by sentiment. She sought to reclaim her lover from darkness. She tested the dagger's edge against her thumb, drawing a perfect bead of blood. My ancestor Morgana saw the true potential, that the moment of transformation could be redirected, the curse's energy harvested. Eleanor's academic mind raced through the implications, even as fear threatened to overwhelm her. That's why none of this is in the Brotherhood's records. There were 2 witches, 2 competing prophecies. Very good, Professor. Lilith approached, using her bloodied thumb to mark Eleanor's forehead. For centuries, our order has sought Ravenwood's grave, while the Brotherhood guarded it. Neither of us knowing the curse required a specific key. Her eyes raked over Eleanor's plus-sized frame with undisguised contempt. A woman of substance. How Seraphina must have laughed at her cleverness. Anger flashed through Eleanor, burning hotter than fear. And yet here I am. Maybe Seraphina was smarter than you think. Something flickered across Lilith's face. Doubt, perhaps, before her confident mask returned. It matters not. The blood moon rises in hours. The Ancient One grows more human with each passing minute, which means the curse is progressing exactly as we need. She nodded to her followers. Prepare the vessel. I will bring the sacrifice. As cultists moved forward, with bowls of scented oils and pigments, Eleanor closed her eyes, focusing on the bond with Mikhail. It had grown stronger since their separation, as if their connection were compensating for the distance. She could feel him more clearly now, his pain, his determination, and beneath it all, something warm and fierce that she hesitated to name. Mikhail, she whispered internally, hoping the bond might carry her thoughts as it had carried his. Can you hear me? For a moment, nothing. Then, faint but distinct, Eleanor, where are you? Some kind of ritual chamber. The main cathedral, I think. They're preparing for a ceremony at moonrise. She tried to project mental images of her surroundings. I see it, his voice replied in her mind, strained but clear. The Brotherhood. Are they here? Yes. Victor planned to disrupt the ritual, but I don't know if they succeeded. A cultist tilted her head back to paint symbols on her throat, and Eleanor had to break her concentration momentarily. When she reconnected, she added, "What's happening to you?" A wave of confused sensation washed through her, pain mingled with an odd, almost euphoric lightness. The transformation accelerates. I can feel my heart beating, actually beating, Eleanor. After 4 centuries, the wonder in his mental voice moved her unexpectedly. Can you escape? Working on it, came his wry response. The silver weakens me less each hour, but so does the vampire strength that might break these chains. I'm caught between states, neither fully monster nor fully man. One of the cultists barked an order at Eleanor to stop mumbling to herself. She opened her eyes, pretending submission while maintaining the mental link. They want to use the curse's energy when it breaks, she explained quickly, to transform others into vampires. I suspected as much, Mikhail replied. The Crimson Order always sought power, not truth. But there's something else you should know, something I've realized through the transformation. His mental voice grew urgent. The curse isn't what we thought. Seraphina didn't create it to punish me. His thought cut off abruptly. Eleanor felt a jolt of pain through their bond, then nothing. Mikhail, she called mentally, panic rising. Mikhail! The cathedral doors swung open with a thunderous boom. Lilith entered, leading a procession of robed figures. In their midst, dragged between 2 burly cultists, was Mikhail. Eleanor's breath caught. The transformation had progressed visibly in the hours since she'd last seen him. His skin, while still pale, now held a flush of life. The crimson of his eyes had faded to a deep amber, with only flecks of red remaining. Most shocking of all was the labored rise and fall of his chest. He was breathing, truly breathing, like a living man. Their eyes met across the chamber, and the bond between them surged with such intensity that several nearby candles flared higher. Lilith noticed, her eyes narrowing with calculating interest. "The connection grows stronger," she observed. "Excellent. It will make the ritual more potent." They chained Mikhail to a stone pillar opposite Eleanor's position in the pentagram. Despite his weakened state, it took 4 cultists to restrain him. When they finished, Lilith approached him with something like reverence mixed with cruelty. "The great Count Ravenwood," she mused, tracing one finger along his jaw. "For centuries we worshipped you as the pinnacle of vampire nobility. How disappointing to find you so diminished." Mikhail's eyes, those increasingly human eyes, held steady. "I was never worthy of worship, Lilith, only of judgment." "Oh? Has the monster found his conscience?" Her laugh was sharp. "Too late, I'm afraid. Tonight, your curse becomes our blessing." She turned to address her followers. "The hour approaches. Take your positions." The cultists arranged themselves around the pentagram's points, each holding a ceremonial dagger identical to Lilith's. As they began a low, rhythmic chant, Eleanor felt the air in the chamber grow thick with anticipation. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Lilith smiled as she took her position at the head of the ritual circle. "When the blood moon reaches its zenith, I will release the Ancient One from his silver chains. His transformation will complete. He will become fully human again, and the curse's energy will discharge." She raised her dagger. "At that precise moment, I will spill your blood, Professor. Your death will redirect that energy into our willing vessels, transforming them all." Eleanor's heart raced. "And Mikhail will be fully human and fully dead." Lilith's eyes gleamed. A fitting end for the great Count Ravenwood, to die as the mortal he once despised being, while creating the very army of darkness he once dreamed of commanding. Through their bond, Eleanor felt Mikhail's response, not fear for himself, but horror at the thought of creating more monsters like he had been, and beneath that, a desperate, protective fear for her. The chanting grew louder as moonlight began to filter through the cathedral's high windows, taking on a reddish hue that grew deeper by the minute. Eleanor strained against her bonds, mind racing for a solution. Where was Victor? Had the Brotherhood been captured or killed? As if summoned by her thoughts, a slight movement in the shadows behind the altar caught her eye. A flash of metal, the briefest glimpse of a face she recognized as one of Victor's hunters. The Brotherhood was here, waiting for their moment to strike. Relief flooded her, but it was short-lived. Even if they attacked now, the cultists might still complete the ritual in the chaos, or simply kill her and Mikhail immediately. They needed another way. Eleanor closed her eyes, reaching once more through the bond. "Mikhail, the Brotherhood is here. But we need to stop this ourselves." His response came immediately. "The silver chains, they're weaker now. I might break free when she removes them for the final stage. And then what? You'll be human, Mikhail. No match for armed cultists." His mental voice carried a smile. "Not quite human yet, and not quite vampire. Something in between, like the moment of sunset, neither day nor night." The blood moon's light now bathed the entire chamber in crimson radiance. The chanting reached a fevered pitch as Lilith raised her arms. "The hour is upon us," she proclaimed. "The blood moon rises full. Bring forth the Ancient One." 2 cultists moved to unchain Mikhail from the pillar, though they kept the silver manacles on his wrists. They dragged him to stand directly across from Eleanor, their eyes meeting across the pentagram's center. "When I was imprisoned," Mikhail said suddenly, his voice carrying clearly over the chanting, "I believed I deserved eternal torment. Perhaps I did. But Seraphina's curse wasn't just punishment. It was a second chance." His eyes held Eleanor's. "A chance I never deserved, delivered by a woman I never expected." Eleanor felt tears sting her eyes. Through their bond flowed emotions too complex for words, regret and hope, darkness and light, and something that could only be called love. though it was unlike any love she had known before, not romantic infatuation, but something deeper, a recognition of shared humanity, of possibility, of redemption. "Silence," Lilith commanded. She approached Mikhail with a ceremonial key. "It is time to complete your transformation, Count Ravenwood. Time to fulfill both prophecies." As she unlocked his silver manacles, the entire cathedral seemed to hold its breath. The blood moon reached its zenith directly above the central skylight, bathing the ritual circle in deep crimson. Mikhail's shackles fell away with a clang that echoed like a church bell. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then Mikhail gasped, doubling over as though struck. Through their bond, Eleanor felt it. The final surge of the transformation, vampire essence burning away like mist under morning sun. His heart thundered, blood rushing through long dormant veins, lungs expanding fully for the first time in centuries. Lilith raised her ritual dagger, eyes wild with triumph. "Now!" she cried, lunging toward Eleanor. Several things happened at once. Victor and his Brotherhood hunters burst from their hiding places, crossbows firing at the cult members positioned around the pentagram. Chaos erupted as cultists abandoned their posts to engage the attackers. Mikhail, in the last moment of his supernatural strength, leapt across the pentagram with inhuman speed, placing himself between Eleanor and Lilith's descending blade. The dagger plunged into his shoulder instead of Eleanor's heart. And most astonishing of all, the stone floor beneath them began to glow, the pentagram's lines illuminating, not with the expected blood red, but with a pure, almost blinding white light. "No!" Lilith screamed, staggering backward. "This isn't right. The prophecy was never yours to fulfill," came a new voice, a woman's voice, melodic and powerful. In the center of the pentagram, a figure materialized, translucent at first, then increasingly solid. A woman with flame-red hair and fierce eyes, dressed in garments 4 centuries out of date. Eleanor recognized her immediately from the memory she had glimpsed through her bond with Mikhail. "Seraphina," Mikhail whispered, his voice breaking. The witch smiled sadly at him, then turned burning eyes to Lilith. "Did you truly believe I wouldn't safeguard my spell against corruption? That I wouldn't anticipate Morgana's interference?" She gestured, and the white light surged, burning away the blood symbols painted on Eleanor's skin without harming her flesh. "My curse was never meant to create more monsters. It was meant to heal one man's soul, and through him, perhaps many others," Lilith snarled, raising her dagger again. "Your spell dies with them, witch!" She lunged not at Eleanor this time, but at Mikhail, who was now on his knees, fully human and bleeding from his shoulder wound. Before she could strike, Victor's crossbow bolt caught her in the side. She staggered but kept moving, hatred giving her strength. Eleanor, hands still bound, but filled with desperate determination, threw herself into Lilith's path. They collided, tumbling to the stone floor. Eleanor felt the cold touch of the dagger against her ribs, but Lilith's weakened state prevented her from driving it home. "You think you've won?" Lilith hissed, blood staining her lips. "The curse is broken, Ravenwood is mortal, and you're nothing but a vessel that served its purpose." "You're wrong," Eleanor replied, surprising herself with her certainty. "The curse wasn't about punishment. It was about love." With a surge of strength, she rolled away from Lilith's blade, staggering to her feet. Around them, the Brotherhood had subdued most of the cultists. Victor approached cautiously, crossbow trained on Lilith, who was struggling to rise despite her wound. Eleanor moved to Mikhail, who had managed to sit up, one hand pressed against his bleeding shoulder. His eyes, now fully human, a deep brown with flecks of gold, looked up at her with wonder. "You knew," he said quietly. "Somehow you understood what I only just realized." Eleanor nodded, kneeling beside him despite her bound wrists. "Seraphina sacrificed herself for the spell. People don't do that out of hate. She loved you enough to give you a second chance, no matter how long it took. And you," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "you showed me humanity again, compassion, forgiveness I never deserved." Seraphina's apparition approached them, her form beginning to fade as the blood moon passed its zenith. "The curse is fulfilled," she said. "Love has been found. Not the romantic love of ballads, but something more profound. The recognition of shared humanity. The choice to see beyond the monster to the man beneath." She reached out, her translucent hand hovering over Mikhail's wound. "I forgave you centuries ago, my love. Now you must forgive yourself." Her gaze shifted to Eleanor. "Guard him well, woman of substance. His heart beats anew because of you." With a final smile, Seraphina's form dissolved into motes of light that settled over them like benevolent stars. In the moment of distraction, Lilith made her final desperate move. With a cry of rage, she lunged at Mikhail, ritual dagger raised high. Eleanor acted without thinking. She threw herself forward, shoving Mikhail aside despite her bound hands. The dagger descended and met Victor's arm instead as he intercepted the blow. With his other hand, he drove a stake directly into Lilith's heart. "Not all monsters have fangs," he said grimly as she collapsed. In the aftermath, as Brotherhood members secured the surviving cultists and tended to the wounded, Victor cut Eleanor's bonds. She immediately moved to Mikhail, who was being treated by one of the hunters with medical training. "Will he be all right?" she asked anxiously. The hunter nodded. "The wound is clean. He'll heal, like any man would." Mikhail's eyes found hers, a smile tugging at his lips despite the pain. "I had forgotten what it felt like," he murmured. "To be human, to breathe, to bleed. Is it worth it?" she asked. "After all that power, all those centuries?" He reached for her hand, clasping it weakly but with certainty. "To feel again? Truly feel, without the monster's hunger overshadowing everything?" "Yes, Eleanor. It's worth it." Victor approached, his expression a complex mixture of emotions. "The curse is broken," he stated, looking between them. "What happens now?" Eleanor helped Mikhail to his feet, supporting his weight against her side. "Now? I suppose he has 4 centuries of history to catch up on, and She glanced at Mikhail, a smile forming. "I have a dissertation to finish. Vampire folklore and reality, a first-hand account." Mikhail's laugh, a genuine human laugh, echoed in the ancient chamber. "Perhaps I could contribute a chapter or two." As they walked from the monastery, dawn was breaking over the Carpathian Mountains. Mikhail paused at the threshold, his face turning toward the eastern sky with trepidation. 400 years since I've seen the sunrise," he whispered. Eleanor squeezed his hand. "I hear the first one's the most beautiful." Together they stepped into the growing light. The sun's first rays touched Mikhail's face, not burning immortal flesh, but warming human skin. His eyes closed in simple, profound joy as tears tracked silently down his cheeks. In that moment, Eleanor understood the true nature of Seraphina's curse and her blessing. Not all monsters could find redemption, not all darkness could be turned to light. But for one man who had lost his humanity, the most powerful magic of all had been the chance to reclaim it. And as Mikhail opened his eyes to a world he hadn't seen in daylight for 4 centuries, the bond between them changed. No longer a magical connection forced by a witch's curse, but something freely chosen, tentative and human, and full of possibility. "What do we do now?" Mikhail asked, his newly human heart evident in the vulnerability of his question. Eleanor smiled, taking his hand as they faced the rising sun together. "We live," she said simply, "one day at a time, like everyone else."